right, working on our dice class. We finished our die class last time, but try to do a dice. First thing you have to, I typically do, your first step when you're defining a class is maybe we say what methods we need. Maybe we start with that. So we know we're going to need a constructor. It doesn't make sense to have a private constructor, so we'll have this public dice class. What do we need to know to make a set of dice? Well, we need to know the number of dice. So I'll call this one num dice. How many dice are in your set? And then each die has a variable number of sides, so we need that information as well. So we say num sides. And we're going to make this constraint that all the dice have the same number of sides in the set of dice that we create. We could do the other way, but and then I'm still up in the air on whether you pass in the random number generator, but we're going to do that here, and then we'll just call it rand. Now, as soon as you do that, the compiler complains because it doesn't know what random is. So I put in my curly braces here, and as soon as first thing out of the gate, it tells me, hey, I don't know what random is. This is because we haven't imported that class yet. So we click over here on the little light bulb, and we say add import for Java util.random. That's the one we want. Now you have to read these carefully. Sometimes they don't have it right, or maybe this is a little bit lower. You don't always choose the first one. So do read this before you click on it. Like say, a lot of people will choose this one and say create class random in this package. And if you do that, it creates like a new class called random, and nothing's going to work. It'll be really quite horrible. So you do. If you wanted to create your own random number generator, that's what you would do. You'd click on that one, and then you'd fill in this function that does random numbers. But we want to use this one, the one that comes with the Java library, because we know that works because it comes with the Java library, and millions upon millions of people have used this already, and they know it works. So we're going to use that. All right. So now we have at least the outside of our constructor done. Once you have the outside of a method done, it's good to put in the Javadoc comments. So what you can do is you just put a slash and 2 stars, and then hit enter. And notice how it automatically generates some of the documentation you need for this dice class. Remember, the first line in Javadoc is always the description of the class. And you would say a set of dice with the same number of sides. So when we generate the Javadoc for this class, it will use this description for the dice class. And then here are all the parameters that are coming in. We just say, this is pretty straightforward, but you would just say number of dice, number of sides for all the dice. Okay, so just be really clear about what the number of sides means, and then okay. And obviously these comments aren't going to affect the program, but it's going to affect the readability of the program when, say, you're a user of this dice class and you want to figure out how to call it and what methods it has. We want to have that same type of documentation like we did when we looked at the random class. It told us everything about the random class and how it works. We'd like to have that same level of documentation here. What's nice about doing it this way is the documentation generates itself from these comments. So you don't have to do what other than just put these comments in, then you're good. Okay, so we have a constructor. We have another one, say public int roll, right? We just roll all the dice. Why did I say int there? Anybody know?
Because you can't have
you could say void, right? Why am I returning int? What do you think I'm returning?
You're returning how much they rolled.
Yeah, if you were adding them all up, maybe you add them up all the time. You keep track of it as you keep a sum while you're rolling. So maybe that's that. Maybe that's the sum of all the dice. Say you want to. If you don't have to use it if it's coming back, but if you have it available, you'll use it, perhaps. So why don't we just do that? We're going to roll all the dice. So we would say, well, this is where I put something like this. I say to do. This is so I don't forget to fix this later. Return the sum of all the dice. Just so I remember what that is. And right now I'm just going to return 0, just so the compiler doesn't complain. Because it won't compile until roll returns something. So I'm just going to return a value of 0, which isn't possible, right? It's not possible to roll a 0 unless you have a 0-sided dice, I guess. But why would you have that? So so return some bogus value. So it's really clear to someone who calls it this is not done yet. We also have one where we pass in a specific die in our set, and then we say the die number. So each die will have a number, and we'll make it 0 relative, maybe, or maybe 1 relative. Probably 0 relative though. This 2 complains because it doesn't have it's not returning anything yet because we haven't done anything yet. So yeah, another to do. We say return. Here, return the value of the die, or the value. Okay. And here too, on both of these, we can start our Javadoc comments as well. So a slash and 2 stars, and then hit enter, and it fills the rest in for you. Here we said, rolls all the dice, turns the sum of all dice. Okay. Since we know at this point what it needs to do, we haven't done anything yet. These are just empty, method. Well, it's because it's easy to return, and there are times when you, right after you roll it, you just want to get the sum. So, why don't you just return the value? Well, you have a set of dice, right? So you couldn't really return, because you don't know how many you have. I suppose you could return an array of the values, but we can always ask that individually. Since we can get the die individually from each set, we can get the die and then ask it, what's your value? So that's available. We may never use this, but it's kind of a convenience kind of thing. We could say void here too and just make them add them up anytime they want a total. Is summing the dice time consuming? And the answer is not really. So I don't know. It's one of those 50-50 things. It doesn't take a lot of time to do, and it's kind of nice to have. So, but not necessary. So you're right about that. Same thing here. We can generate the Javadoc comments as well. All right. And then what does roll die do? We have to be careful here. Rolls the die with the what?
Is that a singular die?
Yeah, so rolls the die of the die number specified. So we're rolling that single die, and then we pass in that number. We want to make it clear here that this die is going to be, well, you have a choice. You can say, are we going to make it 0 relative? So you have this, like the arrays and array lists are all 0 relative. I'm going to say the first one is 0, the second one is 1. For a lot of users, that's confusing. So maybe we say a 1 relative. So we start counting at one relative die number. Okay. And then we return the value So what happens to all this Javadoc that we create? Well, there's this nice little feature here in the Run menu where you say Generate Javadoc. See that there? What's nice about it is you just press that button and it makes the website for you. You don't have to make the website. Sometimes it shows it to you, but it's not showing it to us. So if we go out to where this project is located, I'm not really sure. Let me see where it's located. We say save as. Save as will always tell you where it's at. And we're in looks like my OneDrive NetBeans project called Yahtzee. Okay, so what you can do is go out to that folder, Documents, NetBeans projects. Yahtzee up top. Yeah, there's Yahtzee. And then there's a folder called dist, and inside that there's Javadoc. And here's your website. It's already built for you. We just the actual source. You're looking at it, I guess. But if you're looking at this is odd. See how we don't have a description here? Thought we put a description in. Didn't seem to pick that up. But here, it looks like it picked up that. Set it ice with all the same number of sides. And it looks very professional, right? Instance methods, concrete methods. You have a roll and roll die, the ones we created. Here's the methods that you inherit from the Java.object class. Here's the constructor detail. Here's the other methods, right? See, normally when you're working on a large project like this, you would have to write this documentation describing how to use this library of die stuff. But now with Javadoc, you don't have to do that. You just have to put comments in your code, and it automatically creates the documentation for you, which is a boon for programmers because they hate doing documentation, and it's the description of it is right here next to the code. So if something's not lining up, you can see it directly because the actual text is right next to the code. That was always my biggest problem, is I spend half my time doing documentation. When you're a programmer, you spend about half your time doing technical documentation. You're not actually coding. This allows you to stay in coding land a lot longer. You don't have to do all that fancy formatting. It does it all for you, as long as you set up the comments correctly. All right, what other things does this class need to be able to do? Yeah, add them up. So let's do that one. Yeah, add them up. Add them up. And we'll just add them up, I guess. It returns an int. So again, we put in our Javadoc. This is pretty straightforward. Adds all the dice together and returns the sum of all the dice. So if you can't write the Javadoc when you're creating a class, say you don't know what this is supposed to do, then you're not ready to start coding yet because you don't know what it needs to do yet. But once you have a good picture in your head about what this dice class needs to do, you should be able to write the Javadoc for that even before you write the code. In fact, I recommend doing this in this order because it forces you to think about what you're building before you start building it. The biggest mistake most programmers make is they start building something before they understand it. So having to write the Javadoc allows you to understand it. All right, so here we are, add them up. Again, we're just going to return 0. It's not possible. And then we'll put our little to-do thing in here. To-do, fill this in later. So we're just making our class structure. We're not providing any functionality yet. We're just creating it. Okay, so we have add them up. we'll hold off on that drop low one until we, like if we do a Dungeons and Dragons one, we can add that. But another really important one, this is probably the most important one, is this one, get die. And you pass in a die number. This allows you to get a single die, allows you to re-roll that single die, because remember, die has a roll method that's public. It allows you to ask its value to see what its value is. We need to do that a lot. So we would say, oh boy, what should it return? And the answer is kind of interesting. It should return a die. Okay? An object reference to a die, because you say, I want to go get that die, and it'll return a reference to it. And so, and it's all based on this die number. For now, let's just return null. Okay, clearly that's not going to work, and that'll make the program blow up if anyone tries to do anything with the die. Calls this function, tries to do something, but they got null back. It'll automatically stop the program. And that's what you want here, because we haven't done anything yet. So again, another to do. You don't have to say what you need. You need to go get that die. And then again, the Javadoc would be helpful. So /2 stars. Gets at the one. So again, be really clear about what we're doing. We're going to make this one relative just to make it easier for non-programmers perhaps to use. That way we don't have to do a lot of translation. And then finally, here we return the die at that position. Okay. What's the die number? The one relative position okay. So the next time we generate our Javadoc, it's going to add this Javadoc to it. What other things did we say we needed? Get die, add them up, roll die, roll. We have a constructor. I think that's everything.
Don't we need to put the instance variables at the end?
Yeah, I was just thinking, are there any other methods? I can't think of any. There's that one for Dungeons and Dragons that we might think about. Yeah, so we say int, we said num sides. I mean, take a look at the constructor. That tells you num dice, num sides, and the random number generator. So num sides, int, num dice, and then we say random. So those are our private instance variables. We didn't say they were private, so you got to say that. I think by default it is private, but it's better to write it out just to be certain. Because we don't want classes outside of this class to be able to get to this information directly. Why don't we want that? It's because it reduces the complexity level of the system and allows you to debug it a lot easier. Okay. Now, once you create the instance variables, you have to think about, do I need accessors and mutators for these things? Do we want to be able to change the number of dice after we built the set? Or do we want to be able to change the number of sides of all the dice after we build the set? And I would say the answer is no. Typically, you don't do that. If you need a different kind of dice set, you just create another one. What about the random number generator? Would you want to switch that out? And the answer is no. Do you want to be able to get the number of sides? Well, yeah, probably. And the number of dice, yeah, you can see that. You need that every once in a while. Do you need to get the random number generator again? Probably not, because there's only one anyway. So maybe we just need accessors for num sides and num dice. So the way you do that easily is you just go to the refactor menu and you say encapsulate fields, right? So a field is a private instance variable. Here they're calling it a field. And we're putting a wrapper around it so no one can get into it unless they go through these get functions. So the ones we said we needed were get numsides, get numdice. There is one other accessor that we're using, get die, or we're calling it, is that what we call it? We said, yeah, get die. So that's an accessor as well. It's not listed here. So a lot of these things, we're not going to be able to change the number of sides because we're not going to provide a set num size or set numdice, and nor are we going to allow them to change or get the random number generator. So we say refactor. And it automatically generates the mutator or the accessor methods for you. And also generates the Javadoc. See that? A lot of times, though, this Javadoc is pretty redundant. You just say gets the number of sides each. Right? And so, right now our documentation is finished. We've already done all our documentation. Yeah. So if I run Javadoc one more time, I generate the Javadoc, and then I go out and look at it. I'm a little confused here why our dice class doesn't have a description. Let's see if we can make that happen. But here's, yeah, I probably didn't fill it in, but here you can see all of our stuff that we put in the Javadoc is now here, or in the source code is now in the Javadoc. I think what's missing is right here, where the class gets described. Yeah, right here we're missing that. So a class that models a set of similarly shaped dice. Put your name in there. You might put your actual name in there instead of your student ID number. That would be helpful. We'll generate the Javadoc again and see if we get our description now. Now the expectation in this class is as we create new classes, the expectation is you do create Javadoc comments, and then that when I run Javadoc, so there it has our description now of the class. We can click on the class and it takes us to all the information we need to be able to use this. So in just a short amount of time, we've been able to make this dice class pretty easily. But of course, this class right now is just an empty shell, right? It has no functionality. It's kind of like that. Well, I get the guess methods are functional, I guess, because they already got coded. But everything else doesn't have any code in it. I call it like, that if you wear a suit, a guy wearing a suit, they have a handkerchief in their suit, and you don't use that handkerchief to blow your nose on. It's for decoration only. So we've only done the decoration part. We haven't done the actual programming yet, but we're in good shape to do that. We've got the structure of our class. We've got it fully documented. Now we know what we're doing, and we know what we're building. We can go in and now we can build it. What can we do first? Well, we're missing something. And the thing we're missing is, we need an array of dice of some sort, or maybe an array list of dice, right? because we need to keep track of that here in the dice class. So then our question is, should we use an array or an array list? What do you think? So I'm going to pose that question to the class. Why would you use an array? Right, we don't need to change the size. We made a rule that said, well, once you create this set of dice, we're not going to add new dice to it, nor are we going to change the number of sides. So yeah, using an array would be a good choice because it doesn't have a lot of overhead and we're not going to change its size. If we need a different set of dice or different size, we'll just create a new set. So down here then, here in the instance variables, we're going to add one more thing. We say private, you would say die. Remember the syntax on arrays? We just did that chapter. You do that. And here I would call this one, I call this one my dice. Why do I use the term my for this? It's because it belongs to the dice class. So I call this my dice because this array of dice, individual dice, are going to be in my class. So I'm going to call them, these are my dice. I guess from the point of view of if I were the dice class, what would I call it? And that's what I would call it. And then do we instantiate it here? You can if you want, but I would not recommend doing that. So I would just do that. Okay. Now it's going to complain here that it's telling you, hey, random hasn't been used yet, nor has my dice been used. I said, well, of course not. We haven't written the code yet. But at least we have this nice array. Now, are we going to want the user to get access to this internal array of dice? And the answer is no. We don't want them to be able to set it. We don't want them to be able to get it. We do want them to be able to get a single die out of it, but we have a method for that up above right here. So we have this nice array. So we now we go back to our constructor now and we say, okay, now we have everything we need. We know the number of dice we need. We know the number of sides. We have a random number generator. I guess we're ready to build our array. Okay. So since we're building the array and not just reading through it, we can't use a for each loop. We have to use a regular for loop or maybe a while loop. We use a for loop here because we know how many we need because the user's passing that in. So you could say this. You could say for int I equals 0. We're going to start at 0. And then we say I less than num dice. And then I++, just like we always do with the for loop, right? So we're just going to count from 0 to 1 less the number of dice. Since we're starting counting at 0, our relational operator here is not less than or equal to, it's less than, because we have that extra one at the beginning. Okay, so there's our for loop. What do we want to do? Well, we want to we have num dice, yeah, coming in. Oh, yeah, you're right. Good point. We haven't actually stored num dice yet. So let's do those first. So this dot num dice. So we're taking the instance variables and we're setting them to what's coming in on the construction parameters. So it'd be like that. So it'd be a good idea to do that first. Num sides. Do these names really need to be the same? And the answer is no. You can call them pretty much anything you want, parameters. But inside the class, you want meaningful names. And we'll say num sides. This num sides is the one coming in as a parameter. The green one is the instance variable inside this object. And then we'll store the random number generator. Or do we need to store it here? I would say, yeah, but I think it's the die who needs to store it. So we'll let the die store it. We're not going to store it here. Okay. Why would we do that? I'll show you why. Yeah, it's not initialized. So we do need to create it. I suppose we need to create it here. Do we create it here, or do we create it on the outside of, in the main method of die? And I think we'll do that. We'll do that outside of the dice class.
Do we need to put it in here because it's already in our die class? Right?
Yeah, it says, the question is, how do we get it from the main method down to our die class?
It's an input in our die class.
Right, but here we're creating the die. That's the next thing we're doing. How do we get it then from here to there? So you would say, you would say this. You would say,
You would put it into the die class, right? Because we would put our Yahtzee one.
yeah, you could store it, but I'm saying you probably don't need to store it because you have it as a parameter, and you're going to send it right into the die class, and you only need to do that here in the constructor. So do you need to store it? I don't know. Let's try it without, and then we'll see if we need it. That's a good point. Yeah, good question. One thing we haven't done is we haven't allocated any memory for an array yet. So remember our dice. We say my dice. That's our array. And I'm going to set it equal to new dice. And then here we finally say how many we want. And this would be num dice. You can use the parameter or you can use the instance variable. Either one is the same number, so it doesn't matter. It doesn't like that because we need a name for it. So we would say new dice. What am I forgetting? My dice equals, let's see what the error.
Because you want it to be a new die.
Oh yeah, that's right. New die. Oh yeah, you're right. Oh, I see what you're saying. Oh, interesting. Yeah, we can't just do this. We have to say,
So you're making an array of die, not dice.
yeah, array of dies. So we say,
Just new die.
yeah, that's the one. Okay. Yeah, the reason I was confused is these names didn't match. But, okay, so we've got an array now, and now we can go here and create our die in the array. So we have, well, say we're doing our Yahtzee game. We have 3 slots to fill in. So we would say my dice, sub I equals new. Well, we've already created these dice, haven't we? No, we created the array, but we haven't created the die yet. So we say die. What does die need? Well, it needs num size. We have that. And it's the same for all the die. And then our random number generator that came in as a parameter. So we have that available. This is the only place we'll need it, so maybe we don't need to store it as an instance variable. But that's it. That's the main thing this class or this method has to do is initialize the instance variables. One of our instance variables is that array, so we initialize that. And then we find, though, down here, do we really need this random thing? And we said no. So we can get rid of that. So now we have our array of dice, which is cool. Okay. So we're going to take a brain break right here, and then we'll look at some of these other ones. Yeah, it does that all the time with mine, too. Since we have no set functions, we have no way of changing it. It sees that as constant, right? Because once you set it, you can't change it. So what they're saying is here you could say final.
Does it make a difference?
It does, because the compiler, if anyone tries to change it later, even within this class, it will say, no, you can't do that. And that's probably good, because that's what we want. We don't want it to change after we call the constructor. How about this dice class? Does that change either? And it doesn't. Once we set it, that's the way it's going to be. So it's just one more level of protection to make sure that nothing inside or outside the class will change any of these things. Once they're set in the constructor, that's the only place you can change them. and that's fine. With this class, that makes sense. All right, so we'll take a brain break, and then we'll try some of these other ones. I don't know if we're going to finish today, but I don't want to blow everyone out of the water. Now, I'm making a video of this. I know this is really hard, so if you're not following along, you can go back to the video and then you can go through this at your own pace. And you'll see the die class at the beginning of this video. So if you didn't get that one done, you can take a look at that and make sure that works. But we're slowly building up a nice set of dice class. And we're doing it in a step-by-step process. Again, this is the process that you always use when you're creating a new class. It's something like this. All right, we'll pause here. So we're looking at the roll method. And this is just rolling all the dice. In fact, in Yahtzee, you rarely do this. Maybe you roll it right the first roll of your turn, but then you hold some dice, and then you roll them individually. So maybe this is the first roll on Yahtzee, let's say. So we're just going to roll all the dice. We had said that, Jackson was wondering, well, why are we returning a value? And he's got a very good point. Should we return the sum? There's just a lot of time in Yahtzee when you're scoring where you get the sum of all the dice, and probably isn't the best place right here, but there's not a lot of, it doesn't cost you too much. So you would just need to create a variable called sum and start it out at 0. But you don't need to if you don't want to. And then we just want to loop through all our dice, so it's just the same as our loop here, right? So we can grab that loop we have in our constructor, and we can reuse it here, because we're looping through each one of them. And instead of creating this dice, we're just going to roll them each one at a time. So you can whack all of that. You say, go to that spot in our array and get that die, and then just roll it. Can we roll it? See that right there? It says roll. So we say roll. Now remember, roll returns back the number it rolls, right? So then what we can do simply is we can just say sum plus equal. You say, take whatever's in the sum, roll the dice, and then add it back into the sum. Our sum starts out at 0, so on that first roll, we're adding it to 0. But we do this. You could say sum equals sum plus, but the programmers are generally averse to being redundant. No, you say plus equals, because again, you want to accumulate all the die together. Yeah, question. Yeah, that's what add 'em up's going to do. It's going to do this exactly. The only difference is it's not rolling it. It'll be instead it'll say get value. Yeah, like I said, the sum is not necessary unless. I'm thinking it's more of as a convenience, but we can leave it out if you don't want it, so let's do it. So the way you do that is you say, okay, void. We're not going to return anything. We're not going to keep track of the sum. All we're going to do is roll the dice. And we can ask it later what it rolled. And again, we're not returning anything now, so it makes it a lot cleaner. Yeah, I'm not averse to changing the design. That's fine. But again, you got to also change your Javadoc too, because you're not returning anything anymore. So pretty straightforward here. You're just rolling. You go through each dice, tell it to roll itself. It rolls itself. Roll does return a value, but we're not doing anything with it because we're not keeping track of the sum, which is fine. Okay? So there we go. There's our roll. And then we're saying add 'em up is pretty much the same idea, right? So let's just grab that. And we'll put that in here. This time, though, we are asking for the sum. So we say int sum equals 0. And then instead of rolling, we've already rolled it. We just want to get its value. So we go to that die in our array, and we ask it to get its value. Get value. And then we take that value that we get back from that, and we add that to our sum. And we do that, if we had 3 dice, we do this 3 times. We get the value of the first die, the second die, the third die, and then finally we would return the sum. Okay? So one of the algorithms that you do all the time with loops is you take a bunch of values in an array and you add them all together. This is how you do that. Instead of values, though, we have dies. And we ask each die what your value is, and then we add that to the sum.
What's the one that we returned null for?
Or void here. Oh, the one that says null? This one, get die. That's just temporary. That's just temporary. Okay. Doesn't like something? Oh, the plus equals, did you say sum? Did you define sum up above? Yeah, dot get value. Yeah, that's what you need. Okay, so let's try these. We've got 2 of them working, kind of. We were able to construct it, and we're able to get the sum. So let's try that. And we can roll. So now here in our Yahtzee thing, we're no longer doing this. We still want to create the random number generator. So let's just do this. We'll say dice, lowercase c. We'll just go lowercase dice equals new dice. Now remember our number of, we've got to be really careful here on the dice because we say, what's our first parameter? It's the number of dice. Remember, it doesn't matter, or it doesn't really care what it's called. So we've got to say, if we're doing Yahtzee, we have 5 dice with 6 sides. Okay. Right? And then, I guess we need that. And then we pass in the random number generator that we create. Okay? And then instead of rolling a single die, we roll all the dice. We say dice.roll. And then we say system.out. Let's just print out the sum of all the dice. So we would say dice dot add them up. All right, so we got 5 6-sided dice. We're rolling all of them, and then we're adding them up and printing out the result. Let's see if we get meaningful values. 16. Well, what's our expectation? We should get numbers between 5 and, if they're all 6s, 30, I guess. So 5 and 30 is our range, because you can't roll a 0, right? There's 15. There's 10. 24, that's good. 14, 20, 23. Oh, there's 5. Whoa, that's a Yahtzee. How do I know it's a Yahtzee? Because they're all 1s. The only way you can roll a 5 is if they're all 1s. So far, so good. It's kind of looking like it's working. It seems to be within our range. We didn't get any numbers that were more than 30 or less than 5. Yeah? Question? Okay, I'll come over and look. Okay, so now we're not creating any more individual dice or dies. We're creating a dice class that has those dice in it, and now we can create any number of them. You know, we could say I want 100 dice for some reason, and we'll make them 20-sided dice. Roll it, and we get monstrous numbers. 1,054, 1,030. Okay, so you get some pretty big numbers. I'm trying to get 2,000. I wonder if I can. Yeah. So.
You mean rolling all 20s?
Yeah.
120s?
Yeah, 120s, you get 2,000, you're right. Yeah, so you would never get there. Unless you do all get lots of 20s. So you're never going to get to 2,000. How about one-sided dice? What should we get? I like doing silly things. We probably should get a 1. Ah, we do. But we have to be careful here. What if they say, I want 0-sided?
20 to the power of 100.
Ooh. Like a power of 2.
1 of it, whatever that is.
Yeah. Ugh. So if you have 0 sides and 1 dice, what do you roll? It should crash, I'm thinking. Nope, it rolls a 0.
Well, it's just saying you're creating 0 dice.
Yeah, 0 dice. How about creating 1 0-sided dice? Chunk, yeah, that's where I kill it. Computer does not like that. Bound must be positive. Right? So when we said next int, we passed in a 0, and it can't be 0, so it throws up. So, but now a nice multi-purpose dice class. Any set of die we can create. If we're rolling for Dungeons and Dragons, we do that, or maybe that with the new rules, and then we're doing Oh yeah, sorry. Is that the num sides or num dice? I can't remember now.
It's dice.
Dice and sides. Okay. Yeah, we're going to have to be super careful on that. I get them always mixed up. They're both ints, and it doesn't matter to the computer. It sees these are both ints. That's all it checks. It doesn't look at their names or their values or anything. Now, if we want to be super nice, we found that trying to roll a 0-sided dice blows up the program. You should never blow up the program, so you should probably check for that in the constructor to make sure they didn't put a 0 in there. So we'll maybe do that next time. But anyway, we have somewhat functional dice class. We still need to be able to roll a specific die, and we'll make that 1 relative. And then we need to be able to get that die, so we haven't done that yet. But apart from those, we're doing pretty good.